Dave, The Rock is back in a WWE ring. Did you ever think you'd see him make not a WWE appearance, but actually work a WWE match again?
No, not until the challenge, because he'd said absolutely not.
Right.
So no, I did not expect it. And the one thing about this is that we had a year buildup.
Yep.
And that was, I think a lot of people were negative about the year buildup. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great idea. So yeah, I thought. Now what I didn't think was such a great idea was him wrestling at the Survivor Series. I will say that.
Right.
But as far as him wrestling at the WrestleMania again, I don't know how big WrestleMania would have been that year, but when that match was announced, I thought, it had a chance to be the biggest ever, and it's money wise it was. I mean, the Trump show probably did a few thousand extra buys, but this was I think $10 more expensive for tickets, and the live gate was the record. And The Rock comes from Hollywood, and he also comes from the mentality of old school wrestling. He was one of the guys who wants to know what the gross is. He's one of the guys who wants to know what the TV ratings is. And for him to come back, the goal is to be on the all-time biggest show in history, and he was on the all-time biggest show in history to set records. And so that was a big success. That is what if he was going to come back, he wanted to be the biggest show in wrestling history. And from a money standpoint, that was the biggest show in wrestling history.
And so what did you think of Rock's performance, Dave? I was blown away. I mean, he had some issues kind of blowing up down there towards the end, but he comes off the top with the crossbody. He does, a really solid half-hour match with John Cena after so many years on the shelf on this kind of a platform. I was quite impressed. What did you see in The Rock's return performance where he actually pins John Cena?
Well, what I was impressed with was at the Survivor Series when he comes back in his first match. And granted, he really only did a few spots, but it was like he was lighter and he was so quick. I mean, that blew me away in the match with The Miz and R-Truth. Is like I thought, he was good enough as a wrestler that he was going to be fine, right? I mean, there's a certain thing. It's like he's not going to be bad. Mm-hmm. He came back at that Survivor Series, and it was just like, my God, he's quicker than he was when he was younger. I was very impressed. It was, and he came back and he turned in, whatever. But he was a gym demon. You know what I mean? You don't look like that. I mean, you don't look like that for a lot of things. But one of the things is he was a gym demon, and he trained his ass off and all that.
Was it the right move to put him over Cena?
Yeah, because it built for the rematch. At the time, I was surprised because I figured it was one and done, and then you would put Cena over. As soon as he got the 3 count and he won, it was like, oh, he committed to come back a second year, and they had nothing better the next year. Granted, it was not the match. The second year was not as big as the first year. It wasn't going to be, but it was still bigger than anything else they had. So it still worked. And the idea of the second year was, him to come back and be the champion. That was his mentality of the first year. Just coming back will be big. The second year, I'm going to surprise everyone and win the championship. And him and Vince were on the same page with that. Some people would say, maybe he shouldn't. I think it was probably the right move, but because he did work all those matches and everything, and he did blow. But you can absolutely debate whether the championship part of it. You can't debate whether he should have been in this match. Plus, it's the first one. It's like if he would have lost, they were in Miami. You know what I mean? He shouldn't have lost in Miami in that way. Mm-hmm. I mean, he could have, but there was a more positive of him not. So, the whole crowd was for him. I think it made for a better story to do the 2-year story. Again, you do the biggest match, biggest money match in the history of wrestling. It's professional wrestling. I think the mentality is okay, you got to do a rematch at some point. And if he didn't win the first one, if Cena won the first one, there's really no rematch.
Yeah, I think so. That night I didn't expect a rematch, so I was blown away by the finish because I thought Rock was going to ride off into the sunset. Cena is left carrying the company in Rock's stead, having just lost to The Rock. So I didn't see the.
I thought the exact same way. I thought it was one match. I thought that was going to be it. And when he won, it was like, wow, they're going to do a second match. I thought, again, all things considered, Rock tore his hamstring, which I didn't even know about till like 2 months later. But he tore his hamstring in the match. And, I thought he did real well. Considering a layoff, he was in shape. It's one thing to be in shape to do a couple spots in a tag match. It's another thing for a 30-minute match. And it's like, yeah, I know you train hard, but he was also, years and years out of the ring and doing a 30-minute match and doing it in front of all those people with the nerves and everything. He got tired. As good a shape he was in, he got tired. Cena didn't, but Cena's doing it every night. And Cena's, for whatever you want to say good and bad about Cena, Cena's ring conditioning is excellent.
Now, there was a lot of talk last year, of course, one of the hottest stories in wrestling, about the frustrations that led to CM Punk's abrupt departure from the WWE. After the legal settlement, he did a bunch of interviews with Colt Cabana, long interviews with Colt Cabana, and tried to explain it all. And one of the things that emerged as the frustration, and this was kind of known ahead of time, was he was rather disenchanted by the way The Rock was positioned above him, because at this point in time, he's the WWE champion, he's having his run, and on this particular show, WrestleMania 28, he's in the semi-main event defending his championship against Chris Jericho. Was this not a fork in the road night for CM Punk, Dave, but was this part of the frustration mounting here? Was this a show that CM Punk felt aggrieved by in terms of Rock's positioning?
I think he was madder than next year, but, he may have been. I don't know for sure. I got, I think, he certainly said things that led you to believe that. Kind of bothered me because it was like these kind of matches, they come along once every, not every year and maybe not even every decade.
Oh, yeah.
Like the kind of a match where you can go out there and set an all-time record for business. And CM Punk against John Cena, wasn't going to do that. They'd had a great match. Probably had a better match than John Cena had with The Rock, but they weren't going to do the business. And at the end, it's a business. And to me, the anyone and everyone who argued, anyone who argued with the first John Cena Rock match, I just thought I'm sorry, I can't accept it. I can't accept not seeing the obvious. I'm like that with MMA too. It's like if when people argue, Jack, about this, when people argue about a match that is so obviously a money match, whatever the argument is, I don't care. When it's obviously a money match because so few come along. A real money match, not the one that you can do 5 times a year, the one that comes along every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. When that match comes along and that scenario is there, even if it's not perfect, it's like you do it and you do it. You don't, and you go, well, if we can do it in a year, well, God, these guys may lose. Yeah. You know what I mean? So if it's there, you take it. Okay. And this is the same thing with this situation.
Is your impression, though, that Punk thought that, my impression, Dave, is not that Punk thought he should have worked Cena in the main event and that Rock shouldn't have, but that should have gone on second to last in the vein of Hogan Rock at 18 and Triple H Jericho But
that was a failure.
Yeah. No, it was, but I think Punk, in his mind, thought that this is just me kind of painting a psychological portrait of him based on what I've read and heard from him. But it seems to me like he is a believer that he would have to do that to be perceived as a show closer, even if it wouldn't have worked. You have to insist on things like that before they'll actually see you that way. So even if it was a failure, he still would have had done it, and it was worth pushing for and worth lobbying for.
I would say that would have been a bad idea because him and Jericho did not tear the house down. They had a good match, but they did not tear the house down before. If they would have come later, it would have reflected badly on both of them. And unlike Triple H and Randy Orton, who would Triple H and Randy Orton one year where they couldn't follow.
Oh yeah, that was the Undertaker Shawn Michaels WrestleMania 25 match. Yeah.
Yeah, so they couldn't follow. It was like they had the political thing where they had the excuse afterwards. Oh well, nobody could have followed Undertaker and Shawn, so they were fine. But when Chris Jericho and Triple H couldn't follow Hogan and The Rock, it didn't hurt Chris Jericho. It didn't hurt Triple H, but I think it hurt Chris Jericho. You didn't see Chris Jericho's, all of a sudden, you know what I
Sure,
mean? Someone's
sure.
got to take someone's got to take the blame. And again, since he's not Triple H and he's, not Randy Orton, the chosen ones, if it's the chosen ones, they'll just go, well, they couldn't follow Cena and The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If it's CM Punk and it's Chris Jericho there, they're going to go, they're not main eventers.
Yeah.
It would have hurt him more than helped him.
Now, let's circle earlier in the card. Triple H and The Undertaker rematch from the prior year here at WrestleMania 28. This time it's Hell in a Cell. Shawn Michaels is the special guest referee. They have another blowout, violent match, and ultimately it's 20-0, and The Undertaker goes over, and they have this closing scene up in the aisleway. They call it the end of an era, where Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H are all kind of like embraced, kind of like leaning on each other and facing the crowd, looking for that pop. What are your thoughts on that scene? Do you remember feeling that night that was like some kind of signal that these guys were really stepping out of the limelight? Because I'm not quite sure that happened.
I think, there was weird because as I recall in the build-up to that match, they almost tried to portray it like they were like above everyone else, and I didn't think that was fair to everyone else. It was one of those first times where it's just like, you're the only one. There's no one else. There's no one else. Since Undertaker beat him the year before, and they did have a great match, and there was interest in doing a rematch. The people had interest in it, but there was stuff in that build-up that I remember rubbed me the wrong way where they were trying to portray it like nobody else is at their level, and these guys, it was our era was a different era.
Yep.
And
it was about the era. It was about saying basically it used to be better, and we all know it.
Yeah, and the worst part is that in most people's mind that's true. But when you say it, I think it really reflects badly on you've got.
Well, I'll just change the channel then. If this isn't the product, the version of the product worth watching, then I'm not going to stay around.
Exactly. It's like I think everyone, I don't say everyone because kids probably aren't, but I think every adult that watches this era right now, whether it's whatever era it is, and it's not necessarily for everyone's going to say that 98 to 2001 era, but everyone who's been watching is going to go, what's your favorite era of wrestling? When was wrestling the best? No one that's been a fan for a long time is going to say this era anyway. And that's bad. That's terrible, but no one's going to say it. When you, in the body of your show, go in there and you reinforce it, I think that's bad for modern business.
Yeah, and to say this is the end of an era kind of denotes it in a depressing way. It's like, all right, so this is the last fumes of a time when wrestling was really hot. Great.
Yeah, exactly. These like the Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels guys were the real stars, and now we've got John Cena's kind of like, yeah, and he's a big star, and Steve Austin's gone, and now we got like CM Punk and these guys, and they're wrestlers and all that, but they're not when wrestling was good, you know what I mean? And it's just like, man, it's like whether that's true or not, and whether the public thinks that or not, and the public probably does. If I'm running that company, I'm trying to do everything I can to pretend that it's the exact opposite, that those guys, the Bruno Sammartinos and the Ric Flairs, they were great, and its history is great and all that. But these guys are better athletes now, and they're better talkers now, and they're better this now. Even if it's not true, it's like you want to, you want people to think that they're watching the new version of all-time greats as opposed to a business that's running on fumes that, that like didn't lose its luster, and it's for whatever reason, societal wise, it's not as big as it once was. You don't want to be freaking horse racing or boxing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, performers that, were good enough to actually engender optimism that the future may be better in some ways than glory day periods weren't necessarily being positioned all that strongly at this point in time. No better illustrated than the opener of WrestleMania 28, where Sheamus puts down Daniel Bryan as he deserves to be in 18 seconds. What was the big idea with this piece of business? 18 seconds?
That was, what's funny is I had heard, I think about 2 days before, that was going to happen. It's going to be, kiss, kick, pin, whatever, 10 seconds, right? And it was just like, everyone who heard it thought, oh my God, because Daniel Bryan was a big favorite, and that to that crowd, he was, he was over enough to that crowd, where
He was coming in
they
as the
knew.
champion. He wasn't just some jabroni challenger. He was the champ.
Yeah, but he was a joke champion.
Sure,
So
but
he was always,
in this match, he was supposed to be the one coming in with, a bit of credibility to him. It wasn't supposed to be a squash match in anybody's mind.
yeah, well, but in their mind, it was like the whole thing was this big joke where it was this feud with the Big Show, Mark Henry and Daniel Bryan, and it's like Daniel Bryan's always going to get killed, but somehow he sneaks out of it. But that it's like
Right.
he's this lucky heel it's a joke that he's this, it's like he was a joke champion.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like the champion like John Cena. When John Cena's the champion, he's portrayed as the best guy in the company. Mm-hmm. Daniel Bryan, he's portrayed as this guy who backdoored in and just, cashed in on a guy he could never ever beat and retained it on fluke after fluke.
Sounds like a chance to get that record that's oh so appealing. Shortest title match in WrestleMania history. Got to do it, Dave. Got to do it 18 seconds.
Well, the idea was Sheamus was their guy. Yeah. And I mean, this is one of those things where you go in there and you're in that meeting and it's just like, Daniel Bryan, he's never be the guy and he's, and all this. So and Daniel Bryan's there, he's very much the Chris Jericho to Triple H in 2001 in the sense of our guy is Sheamus and we're going to kick him off. How do we kick him off the biggest? Or Bob Backlund to Kevin Nash is another one. It's like, yes, he's got the belt, but at no point do we take him seriously as champion. So, but this next guy, he's our guy. So, he's Triple H's handpicked guy. What do we do to make Sheamus's run? How about we just beat him in 18 seconds at WrestleMania right away? It's the quickest win. What a way, right? And of course, in another era, they'd have been right. In this era, it completely backfired. Nobody, Sheamus's run was a complete flop. Daniel Bryan everyone resented it so much that Daniel Bryan got over more. I mean, it was literally the greatest backfire in the history of the company because it was a backfire, yet somehow they benefited from it in the long run.
Yeah, it made it look like it was a grand design if they wanted to cast it that way, and they certainly did. They ended up incorporating the storyline into basically, that Triple H and Stephanie had been trying to do this to Daniel Bryan, and finally he's going to get his comeuppance when the comeuppance part was never part of the plan, but it just formed. So you've mentioned a few times here, David, talking about WrestleMania 28, The Rock back in the ring one-on-one with John Cena, setting records. Now this didn't do the most buys in WrestleMania history. Of course, that was WrestleMania 23. But can you just explain the cumulative record? Is that what it is as far as most revenue? Why is this the biggest money show?
Because the ticket, the pay-per-view, what was it? The pay-per-view price was way up.
Uh-huh.
They'd raised it, I think, twice by then. So revenue-wise, this blew away every show that they ever did, and it was the biggest gate that they'd ever done as well. Live gate, although the gate record ended up, was it the next year's WrestleMania ended up breaking the gate record. So, that was by far the biggest money wrestling show in history, and still is, but by a long shot.